Hi, I'm Ann. Welcome back to my channel. Today my husband and I are going to be reviewing Malice by John Gwynne, which is the first book in the
Faithful and the Fallen.
Faithful and the Fallen. I knew Fallen was somewhere in there. So, I guess how we're going to organize this review is we're going to talk about just the basic plot, and we're going to talk about the things we liked and the things we disliked. We did, I think a few months ago, we did a review for John Gwynne's book, Shadow of the Gods,
Yes.
And in that one, we organized it kind of the same way we're going to do this one.
Sure we did. I definitely remember that.
That was a long time ago. And Zach, as the resident fantasy expert, will be helping me in details that I don't remember.
Assuming I remember.
There's three main perspectives, and there's, I would say, three or so more that are dropped in, like a couple throughout, maybe two more.
Yeah.
It's set in a high fantasy world. I would say vaguely medieval. I believe John Gwynne based it on Celtic mythology.
This one is Celtic.
Yeah, so whereas the Shadow of the Gods, that universe was much more Norse mythology, this one's more Celtic. But it feels to me like very, I guess,
They're close enough.
Generically medieval.
Oh, I was going to say, the first time I read it, I thought it was like a mix of Nordic and Celtic stuff. Well, I didn't really think there was much of a difference, to be honest. And then I read the other book and I realized, oh, okay, there's quite a bit of a difference.
This book is a high fantasy. Set in this Celtic medieval world. And it centers around this idea of the coming God War. So I believe it was like thousands of years ago, or at least hundreds of years ago.
Like 1,000 years ago. The original God War in this was basically between just one god and just one demon.
Yeah.
Who was essentially the first like fallen angel. So it was very much like God and the devil type thing.
Like angels and demons
yeah.
type thing.
And it was a war fought purely between angels and demons, and humans and giants are also in this world and at war with each other, but not necessarily because of that. They just, as things got more chaotic in the world, more people started fighting, and what essentially happened was when God came home from getting milk, he saw that all of his children were fighting, and he said, okay, that's it. None of you can have toys anymore. And he demolished the world. He made all the volcanoes go off, made tsunamis, earthquake, everything, until he realized that's exactly what his enemy wanted. And he basically stopped and went to seclusion until, this book. And he's still hiding.
Yeah, so we're introduced relatively early on in this world to this myth, this prophecy that there's going to be two individuals that rise up on opposite sides. So one is going to be fighting for good and one is going to be fighting for the bad. The good one is the sun.
The bright star?
The bright star, and then the
black sun.
Black sun. I was close. I
was like, that's not right, but that's so close.
So basically, like a Messiah and like an Antichrist type thing are going to rise up in this world. One's going to lead like the bad, evil forces, and one's going to lead the good forces in this like big epic fight. So that's the whole premise of the world that we're set up in. But in this world, we follow three main individuals, and they're all three young men. I believe two of them are like 16, 17, and then one of them's like maybe 12 in the beginning.
He is
13?
Just about to turn 14.
He's older than
a couple weeks before 14 at the very first chapter.
Yeah.
And the other two are, I think, both 17 or 18.
So we have Corbin. He is the son of just a
village blacksmith.
A village blacksmith. He's poor, I would say, semi-poor, not really involved in any of the politics that's going on having to do with this upcoming war. And then
he's just vibing.
Yeah, he's just vibing. And then you have Veritas, and he is the son of a baron who is a younger son of a baron who is given by his father to this king.
The High King.
The High King.
So the High King and his line are basically, they're descendants of the original group of people that managed to survive and get to this land. And his line is the line of the original king, the very first king.
Okay,
so that's why he is the High King, but most of the other kings and queens don't really... It's a title more than anything else. Just because, well, yeah, your family is the oldest, but all of us have our own kingdoms and empires.
Yeah, like at one point he tries to call them all together, all the other kings and queens, to like a high meeting, and like most of them do come, but they say specifically, oh, it's just because like we respect you, not because like we are ruled by you. So it's more of like respect thing. So Veritas comes to this High King's palace to serve him, and the High King is like, well, my son is actually putting together a war band for the first time. He's very young. Nathair? Nathair. It's TH. Nathair. Just don't listen.
I've never actually read the book. I've only listened to it.
Yeah, it's spelled Naithar.
Nope, that's not how it's spelled.
Nathair?
That's how... I can't see it that way in my head. Don't listen to her. I'm the fantasy expert, as she said, so...
Anyway, so this prince is the son of the High King, and Veritas goes to serve him, and serves him through the entire book. And then the third... perspective that we see slightly less, Castell.
Yes, Castell.
He is the son of a family who was all killed.
So he lives separate from everybody else in the book, and essentially his family, I can't remember, I don't know if it's ever explained the relationship between him and the king of his realm.
Yeah, because it almost seems to me...
He's close. It's like he's a cousin of the king, or...
They were like a wealthy family within the kingdom. I know that.
Well, like his family was a noble family.
Yeah, they were titles.
So I just can't remember if he's like the cousin of the king, or if he's like the nephew. I think he's the nephew of the king. But basically his family is killed by giants before we meet him when he was like 5.
Yeah, and so most of his character arc is fighting giants, basically. He and an older man who kind of raised him, McKean, and is his protector now. They travel together through the book fighting giants. So those are the 3 main perspectives we follow. We also follow Evnas, who serves one of the kings, actually the king that Corbin is in the kingdom of. And then we have a couple other perspectives that we have. So there's Corbin? No.
Camlin is a bandit in the woods around where Corbin lives, and we get his perspective a couple times throughout the book.
He is more main than I would say the other random perspectives that are thrown in, because he's followed for at least like 10 chapters.
Slight spoiler, because I have read the whole series. Yeah, no, he's a main character throughout the whole series.
Yeah, I guess that. I mean, he is also... He's not as young as the others, but he seems like maybe in his 20s.
Yeah, he's like mid-20s, I think.
Yeah. So he's relatively young, too.
Keep in mind, this is the medieval age, like 30, he's probably an elder.
Yeah. All these, like, kings that are, like, super elderly, they're, like, 35.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. Yeah, so that's the main plot and the main perspectives. The first time I read this book, because this is the second time I read it, I listened to an audiobook 2 to 3 times the speed, and I did not know half of what was going on. So one of my criticisms as well as positives for this book would be simply, it's very hard to read unless you take your time with it. You need to focus on every little detail and remember a lot of the details, because there are a lot of references that are referenced early in the book that come back in the end. And there's a lot of characters that you have to keep track of, especially since some characters will be in one character's perspective. You'll get to know them in that character's perspective, and then they'll show up in another character's perspective, and then you're kind of expected to say, oh, I know that character from this character's perspective. So there's quite a few times where I struggled with memory and trying to remember it. So this time I read it very slowly, and I was able to gather what was going on a lot better.
Even this time, you had to reread the first 5 or 6 chapters, I think, just because you listened to it at double speed or something. Or, I can't remember what it was, but you had to re-listen to it because you didn't catch it all.
And that happened a few times throughout the entire book where I would go back a couple chapters because I was like, what happened again, especially since what they do is they'll have one chapter from Corbin's perspective, one chapter from Veritas, one chapter from like Camlin's, for example, and then it will go back to Corbin. So you kind of forget what's happening with Corbin. So when you go back to his chapter, sometimes I had to like reread a couple chapters before just to be like, what's going on? Oh, another perspective I'm forgetting is Corbin's sister. She was a very main character.
But I don't think she ever had...
She had multiple chapters from her perspective. What was her name? I'm trying to...
Cohen.
Cohen, yeah. She was the only female perspective that we see. She's one of the few female characters. There's not a whole lot of female characters, but I will say...
her, the princess,
the queen.
Corbin and Cohen live, and the queen. And the queen has about 7 lines in the whole book, I'm pretty sure. The princess has a few, and then Cohen's a pretty main character, so she has quite a bit.
Yeah, so I will say that it does follow a lot of the classic fantasy where you don't have a lot of female characters, but I will say it's not like the female characters are poorly developed. It's just kind of a world, because it is focused on a lot of fighting, it is more conducive to following the men in the medieval world. So you follow the armies, you follow the a lot of the politics and high power, so you don't see the perspective of women that much. But I will say I love Cohen. She was awesome.
For the record, if anyone has any problems with that, his second series, the main character is a woman.
Yes. Yeah, Shadow of the Gods, one of the 3 perspectives.
Oh, I didn't even mean that. His second and third series.
Oh. I haven't read his second series.
Woman. Or women. What? They are not men.
Oh, another female character that I loved was the Hermit Lady.
Oh,
she was amazing. She takes Corbin as being her apprentice. Yeah, and she's awesome. I loved her.
There were a couple others. There's another queen that's not the High Queen.
Oh, we didn't like her.
Yeah, flirts with everyone. She's actually ancient, and then she's like 70 or 80, and she's flirting with all these young men all the time.
Yeah, she flirts with the prince who's like 20 or 19. Yeah. I'm just like, ooh, that's creepy. So one of my criticisms for the first time I read it was it's very difficult to read, but I also think if you read it a couple times and you take your time with it, there's a lot of nuances that just build upon each other to create all these like detailed clues to follow for the rest of the book.
So for me, I didn't really have that much of a problem following it the first time. Because I've read books with like 18 different perspectives, maybe not quite that many, but that's common for me. So it wasn't that difficult to follow, but I still missed a decent amount. And then when I reread it this time, there's even way more that I picked up, and I liked it even more. I mean, I knew all the twists and turns that were coming, so that was a little bit different, but it made it better for me to be like, oh, I remember this from this book, and I remember when it comes back in book 4.
Characters are all very good. The only criticism I have for the characters is that I felt like the 3 young men, the 3 main characters, were very similar actions and beliefs. They're all pretty moral individuals. They're all innocent in many ways, which feels weird because like 2 of them become warriors throughout, but you see them growing up. So it's very much a coming of age for all of them.
I disagree. I really enjoy that they're all so similar, especially as you read more, because it really shows that while they all had pretty similar upbringing and pretty similar code, they all take it very differently. The later books, and even in this book, by the end, they're all taking it differently. For example, one of the main characters, who we don't follow his perspective, but he's definitely one of the main characters. He's kind of doing some questionable things, and one of the people who we do follow is kind of like, yeah, but he's my king. Shouldn't I do what he says? Whereas some of the other characters are like, well, yeah, he's the king, and you should just do what he says, because that's what he said. I thought it was really interesting that there's these 3 characters that are all super similar, but they all go in very different directions. They all do things differently.
But that's something that if you go into it expecting vastly different main characters, expect that they will be kind of similar to read. And different enough things are happening in each perspective that I had no trouble like picking out, whose perspective are we in? but also like without context of what was going on. If it was just about their character, I would have struggled to differentiate them. I wouldn't say the book is slow.
No.
There's really good moments of action. That's, maybe you'll have a scene where Corbin is fetching things in the forest for the lady he's apprenticed to. And then the next scene will be like...
Veritas holding the line against an army of giants.
Yeah, something like that. So even if like one perspective doesn't have action happening in the moment, you'll switch back to another perspective. And that is one thing I enjoyed about the perspectives is you don't have action. You have maybe action from one perspective, but then you have a slower something going on in another perspective. And I thought that actually broke up the pacing well because it broke up the speed at which we were accelerating the conflict. While not breaking it up too much, because you come back to the same action, 2 chapters later. But it was enough that it continually was building, but it wasn't enough where, like, you were constantly in action. Now, do we want to talk briefly about spoilers? Why don't you let me hold it? There are some spoilers in this book. So Veritas is serving Nefer. It's Nefer. Not Nefer, Nether.
It's definitely Nefer.
Nether. So Zach is saying that because his nickname for Nether is Nefarious.
Well, yeah, Nefer is short for nefarious. It makes it pretty obvious if he's the good guy or the bad guy.
So Nether starts off the book believing he is the
bright star.
The bright star.
Disclair, as they call him.
Basically the Messiah, the person chosen to like lead the army against the darkness, against the black sun.
Mm-hmm. Except everyone knows, if you think you're the good guy, you're probably the not the good guy.
Well, and at first I was like, it's definitely not going to be him, but I didn't think he was going to take such a downturn because in the end, and these are major spoilers for the end of this book, he ends up murdering Corbin's king.
And his father.
And Corbin's father, and Corbin barely escapes. In fact, we don't know if Cohen is alive, his sister. So that is how this book ends, is Nether, who we believe was, well, at least in the beginning, I believed he was a good guy. He has kind of descended into loving power, and he also killed his father. We kind of learned hints about that earlier, but we don't know that for sure.
It is never confirmed throughout the whole series if he ever actually did kill his own father.
Oh, he definitely did.
But...
So how his father dies is that... Veritas walks into the room and he sees this one guy, I don't know, he's king, a lord or something?
He
or
is
king?
King,
running out, and then Nether is on the floor, bleeding out from like a stab wound, and his father has been like stabbed to death. Mm-hmm. And so Nether is like, oh, this king, like he killed my father. So Veritas leads an army basically into the king's territory and ends up killing the king, but before he kills him, the king says, I didn't kill the High King. It was Nether that killed his own father. And then, of course, Veritas kills him. So we don't know for sure if that's the case, but I definitely believe it. I believe it. Because right before that...
So, right before that, Nefer's just like, oh, yeah, no, it'll be fine. The king walks in, just sprints out, like 5-10 seconds later, like he had time to walk in and say, greetings, my lord, and then the guy was already dead, and there was absolutely no time to...
And so early on, Nefer wanted to, because the High King was trying to gather together these kingdoms to fight against the giants, and Nefer wanted these, basically not bandits, pirates,
the Vikings.
Vikings. To join in the fight. And the High King, his father, said, no, we're not going to associate with those kinds of people. They're literally pillaging our coasts. We can't do that. So Nether still made a deal with them and has been working with them. And the king found out like maybe 20 pages before he dies.
Yeah.
And then miraculously, right as like the High King learns this, he gets killed. And I'm like, no, definitely Nether just wanted more power.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so that's a big spoiler. So we follow, Corbin learning how to fight with a sword, and he's obviously some kind of chosen one. I don't know. I'm guessing he's going to be the bright star, but that's no spoilers for the rest of the season, because we do see like a lot of people, like his mother, his father, as well as this older man who's stable master in the village, protecting him throughout the book. So I have a feeling.
There are a few times throughout the book where he'll just be like wandering along, and he'll be like, "Is that the stable master I see over there? Why is he just watching me? It's so weird."
Well,
anyways,
and also both Nathar and Corbin have these dreams throughout the book, and that is an indication that they're probably like both the chosen one, and one is the dark.
Yeah.
The black sun, and one's the bright star. So I'm assuming that Corbin is the bright stars. So that's my indication. We didn't learn at the end of the book, but also with enough people protecting Corbin, I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. And so I assume they're going to be like have an epic battle at either the next book or the last book, where like Nathar and like Corbin will have to fight it out. But Corbin's also very young. Like at the end of the book, he's maybe 16. Or 15? He's probably 16.
No. So, he's 15. He's probably less than a week away from 16, because basically at the end of the book, they're like, so your coming of age in this world is when you turn 16, you have to basically go sit outside at night for a whole night and stay vigilant. That nobody does. Everyone just falls asleep right outside the castle walls, pretty much. They said. But basically, they said, "Oh, well, you're a great warrior, and there's things going on. Why don't you just do your trial like a week early?"
Yeah,
and then everything goes terribly wrong in about a day after that.
So he's still very young. So he's definitely not up to like leading an army at this point. I mean, he's barely able. Like he's just learning how to fight with a sword. So and he has this amazing little wolf puppy that he raises, and she's so sweet. And then he also has a horse that
Storm and Shield.
Storm and Shield.
Storm is the wolf.
Storm is the wolf. Shield is the horse. So he's very young. So I don't see him like immediately in the next book being able to like face a big army on his own. So I feel like he's going to work to being the chosen one. Yeah. But that is one thing that Zach said he mentioned liking the first time he read it, is you don't know who the chosen one is. For all you know, it could be any of the main characters, even any of the background characters. So
because even with all the weird and questionable things the prince is doing, the fair is doing, there was still quite a bit of evidence for him actually still being the chosen one. Maybe he's not going about it in the best way, but he's still doing his best to be the good guy, in his mind at least. Yeah. So, if it's believable for him to be, the bright star, and for somebody else to be the black sun. So I like that a lot when I first read it. You don't really know for sure.
It definitely plays with the chosen one trope, because even though now I think that Corbin is the chosen one, by the end of the book, at the beginning, I would have no idea like which one of the main characters turns out to be the chosen one.
I just want to take a moment to talk about something that I really liked about this, which is whoops, bumped the camera. I really like all the fantastic creatures that are in this world, which there's not a lot, but the few that are, you see them a lot, and
like
they're cool. So there's humans and giants.
There's also these creatures that the giants ride.
Drakes. Which are, so imagine a dragon. Now take off its wings. That's what a drake is, basically.
Yeah. It's really, like, I picture them as being really cool. Yeah. And I will say, for being like a high fantasy, there's not magic.
A lot of fantasy.
No, it's much more like,
there is more magic in the later books. But there's not a lot, even then, because it's only a very few people who can do it, and the magic they can do, it's not like they're casting fireball. They're not, doing 68 damage to whoever they want to. They're like, oh, we're conjuring a mist, or we're making an illusion, so it's very... Yeah.
It's similar to almost Lord of the Rings, I would compare it to, because Lord of the Rings didn't have a lot of like overt magic. It was more like, oh, you had these mythical creatures controlled by like Sauron or Saruman, and you didn't have like heavy magic, and you had the wizards having very limited power. And I feel like this book is very similar, where it's not like overt in like everyone's doing magic all the time, like in Harry Potter. It's more like very selective, very minor.
See, that's something else I really like, because in a lot of other fantasy books where there is a lot of magic, what if the main stories are kind of just like, yeah, but magic though, why couldn't they just magic it away or do that? So in this, it's like, oh, okay, so if there is healing magic, it's not that effective. It's a little bit better than just healing normally, but it's not that much better. And there's like illusion stuff and like talking to animals, kind of stuff like that. And it's like there's a little bit, but it's not. If the magic wasn't there, wouldn't affect the story at all. It doesn't make you question and go like, wait, but if they have magic, why didn't they just use it?
Yeah, especially since a lot of books will have the protagonist especially have all these extra powers, and then you're like, well, they should be able to use more. Shadow and Bone, I felt like that a lot, where Alina just had so many powers that were overrated. Yeah, and I really appreciate that in this book, where like all these people are kind of just normal in many ways. I mean, obviously they have power and they have different abilities, but they're all kind of normal. So I never felt like any character was very overpowered. They're all just, surviving, vibing.
They're all vivin.
They're vivin. Anyway, so I think that's good, because we've been talking for like half hour and I need to edit this down. But thank you so much for watching. If you've read this book or any of John Gwynne's book, let us know your thoughts down in the comments.
They're the best books ever.
Okay. All right.
That's my thoughts.
Yep. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time now, and I will see you all in the next video. Eventually, he will be back as well.
Yeah, and, a couple of months when we do
in
the
like
next
2
one.
months. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.